新宿の上空に来ています。昨年4月、この新宿から吉祥寺に帰る途中のサラリーマンが行方不明になった事件は、井の頭公園のゴミ箱の中からなんと無残なバラバラ遺体となって発見されたのでした。
It's a quiet morning in Tokyo's Inokashira Park on the 23rd of April, 1994. A 59-year-old cleaner, only known as Miss T, collected trash from garbage cans around the pond area of the park together with about 10 other co-workers. As she was known to feed birds and cats with food she would find, one of her male colleagues put aside a semi-translucent bag that seemed to contain a faint pink substance as if it held some kind of meat. Miss T struggled to untie the seemingly complex knots that kept the bag closed, prompting one of her colleagues to pick up the bag and tear the plastic bag with a bamboo skewer. Then, instead of handing it back to Miss T, the co-worker hastily threw the bag on the ground at the sight of the content and yelled, "It's human." Miss T approached the bag and laid eyes on what had caused her colleague's surprising reaction. Without much delay, both cleaners rushed to a nearby store inside the park and made the shopkeepers aware of their horrific discovery by saying, "There's a human ankle." Upon their return, the shopkeepers confirmed that they believed the finding concerned a discarded body part as well, causing them to immediately reach out to police. The phone call that followed on that calm Saturday morning started a widespread, long-lasting investigation into one of Japan's most bizarre and mysterious incidents that would stay unsolved to this day. Let's take a closer look at the investigation into the Inokashira Park dismemberment case. On the 23rd of April, around 11 a.m., Tokyo's Mitaka police station received a worrying phone call reporting, "Something resembling a human leg was found in a plastic bag." A team of investigators immediately made its way to the location where the phone call had come from, being Tokyo's popular and well-visited Inokashira Park. Upon their arrival and their confirmation that in fact a severed human ankle had been discovered, the following testimony was given by Miss T, as was later stated in an interview. The male cleaner who sorted the bags seemed to think that the bag contained food for cats, but if he hadn't sorted them out beforehand, it would probably have remained buried with other garbage as food waste. It was too clean to be trash, which I thought was a little strange, but there was no smell and there wasn't anything suspicious about it. The mysterious finding led police to investigate the park and its pond, particularly focusing on a multitude of trash cans that stood across the park at the time. Inokashira Park itself consists of sport facilities to the south, the Inokashira Park Zoo to the west, and a pond in its northeastern section. A walk around the entirety of the park is estimated to be a little over 4 kilometers and takes about 1 hour on foot. The pond area, at which the body parts were found, would take a little over 20 minutes to walk around and is approximately 1.6 kilometers in distance. Along this path, multiple entrances into the park are easily accessible. While most garbage cans have been removed by now, several could be found around the pond area in 1994. Several sources present the following layout showing at least 9 trash cans in the vicinity of the pond. After examining the content of each of these, a total of 24 similar bags divided over 7 of these garbage cans were found. And while some only held 1 or 2 bags, one in particular contained 11 of these semi-transparent packages. Some have pointed out that this may have been the location where the culprit entered the park, as it would be convenient to drop most bags at the nearest garbage can. Others speculate that this location was simply a bigger garbage dump at the time, or that this particular garbage can would be more hidden than others. In later efforts, a scuba diving team was deployed to look for any signs of the remainder of the body in the pond itself, but no further bags were discovered. The acquired bags were brought to forensic pathologist Professor Yoshinobu Sato of Kyoden University, who tried his best to make sense of this unusual finding. Though when he started his examination of the bags, the investigation only became more and more bizarre. The 24 bags had a total weight of around 20 kilograms and altogether contained 27 body parts. These parts were first wrapped in black bags with draining holes, which were then packaged in Tokyo Metropolitan Government recommended semi-transparent garbage bags. These outer bags were tied substantially by turning the bag inside out and wrapping it in the same bag once more. One former Metropolitan Police official stated the following: "The garbage bags were wrapped twice in one piece as a method used by people who handle fish, such as cooks or fishermen. It was wrapped in such a way that it prevented water and odor from leaking out. The knot was also tied multiple times to make it difficult to untie, and these knots were piled into a dumpling shape. The body parts were cut into almost perfectly measured pieces of about 22 centimeters in length and a thickness kept to about 20 centimeters. Some of the parts showed signs of them being scraped off by a blade to keep the parts within these specific dimensions. Based on the proportions of these packages, it's highly likely the culprit specifically prepared the body to be thrown away in the garbage cans at Inokashira Park, with their opening being measured at 20 by 30 centimeters. Due to the mailbox shape of the trash cans, the bags would have probably gone unnoticed if not for the cleaning crew. Professor Sato himself rejected the claims that an electric saw may have been utilized and rather suggested a handsaw to be used to cut the body parts. Notably, at least 3 distinctive cutting patterns, likely with different tools, were seen, giving rise to speculation that multiple culprits were involved. And while Professor Sato believed this likely indicated multiple people to be involved in the dismemberment as well, he also proposed a different possibility, stating, "I believe at one point that a handsaw was being used violently, while at other sections a sharp blade was used to cut through flesh and expose the bone, which was subsequently dissected carefully. In some places, the cut is neatly made all the way through the bone, while in other sections, the cut is partially made and then snapped off. Regarding the bone breaking, it's possible that the culprit learned as the body was handled, causing at least 3 clearly different cutting patterns." Another unusual observation is that joints were completely ignored in the cutting process, a location that would be the easiest place to cut through as the mode of operation that is seen in most prior Japanese dismemberment cases. Altogether, an estimated 1/3 of the victim was discovered, with the bags mainly containing limbs and only part of the right side of the victim's chest. The head and a majority of the torso were never found. The partial discovery of the body parts made establishing a time and cause of death challenging, with medical examiner Professor Sato stating, "Based on the degree of muscle decay and remaining stiffness, it can be said that this body isn't that old. In cases of death by poisoning, evidence can be found from bone marrow, but no such thing was discovered. Soft tissue belonging to the rib cage, being muscle tissue attached to part of a rib, showed a slight amount of bleeding. However, it wasn't the place that would have been bruised, and there were no broken ribs. In the end, we couldn't determine why the bleeding had taken place at that location. Significant efforts were made to conceal the identity of the victim. The body parts had been washed clean from any traces of debris, and finger, toe, and palm prints were cut off or badly damaged." Professor Sato also noticed another strange fact that according to him might have had something to do with concealing the identity of the victim.
でこれらの一つ一つはですね、全て水洗いされてます。揉み出してるんですね。ですからこの中の血に一滴も血液が残ってません。
He testified in an interview in 1999. There were draining meshes on both ends of the cut surfaces of each part, and all the blood had been drained out. They must have filled them with water and washed them clean. The culprit probably believed that if blood remained in the body, the victim's blood type would be identified, or that it would be possible to test DNA. However, this is just the way an amateur would think. For example, even if there is no blood, as long as there is bone marrow or muscle tissue, in other words, cells with nuclei, such an analysis can be performed. According to Professor Sato, an operation in which blood is drained in such an extensive way would require an extensive amount of water. This would indicate that the victim may have been dismembered in some kind of facility rather than a random bathroom. Some say fishermen remove blood by using a washing machine, which could have been another option in this case. Other than identity concealment, it's speculated that blood contains components that cause a strong odor during decomposition. Removing the cause of this smell may have made it easier to dump the body parts unnoticed. With only part of the victim found, a lack of blood, and the removal of fingerprints, investigators believed they had a challenging task ahead of them in identifying the victim. However, due to DNA analysis, remnants of finger and palm prints, and a local missing person report, the body was identified only 3 days later as that of 35-year-old first-class architect Seiichi Kawamura. Seiichi Kawamura was born in 1958 and attended school in Tokyo's Musashino City, after which he earned his degree from Toyo University's Faculty of Engineering at the Department of Architecture. In an interview, one high school friend described Kawamura as follows. He had a gentle personality and was rather quiet. Although he didn't have a very noticeable presence, he was the type of person that people would trust, so I have the impression people would always gather around him. After college, Kawamura started his career at a company in the Takadanobaba neighborhood of the Shinjuku ward, at which he worked for 10 years. His former superior stated, "He was a very honest person. Even if you made a mistake, he wasn't the type to hold a grudge. For a person who lived a peaceful life, he was treated in such a cruel manner. It's very regrettable." He then started a new job at an architectural firm in Minato Ward's Shimbashi area, with the aim of wanting to work towards something memorable. At the time of his death, Kawamura had been at this company for 2 years and had just received a promotion to be the chief of the cost estimating department, which requires estimating costs of projects based on blueprints. Seiichi Kawamura participated as a Boy Scout since elementary school and subsequently met his wife Miyoko through his activities for the organization. The couple first lived in an apartment together, with one of their neighbors mentioning, "They had a great relationship. They didn't like a flashy lifestyle and lived a modest life. The husband seemed kind and the wife was a beautiful person. They had a lot of friends coming and going. All kinds of people were always visiting." Kawamura's wife Miyoko also spoke fondly of her husband, saying, "My husband was a cheerful person. He didn't let small things bother him, and he got a gentle personality. I can't think of anyone who would have a grudge against him." After the birth of their first child, Kawamura designed a 2-family home at the northeastern side of Inokashira Park, in which he started living with his wife, 3-year-old son, and parents, less than a year prior to his death. And at the time parts of Kawamura's body were found in Inokashira Park, his wife was pregnant with their second son. After Kawamura was identified as the victim of this bizarre case, acquaintances, police, and media questioned why this calm husband and father had been dismembered and dumped near a place where he lived his quiet life. To get a grasp on what could have happened to Seiichi Kawamura, let's take a closer look at a timeline of his final moments. Thursday, April 21st, 7:30 a.m. Seiichi Kawamura departs from his home located in Tokyo's Musashino City. The road from his house to the nearby Kichijoji station takes about 10 minutes on foot. 8:30 a.m. Kawamura arrives at his office, an architectural firm located in the Shinbashi area of Tokyo's Minato ward. Around noon, Kawamura calls his wife to tell her, "I'm going out for a drink today," referring to a party held by former colleagues to celebrate his new promotion. 5:30 p.m., Kawamura left his office in the Shinbashi area and makes his way to Shinjuku to meet 5 former colleagues at a restaurant near Takadano Baba Station. His former boss remembers. He had been promoted, so his former colleagues gathered together to celebrate. He was in a good mood and singing karaoke. One of his colleagues also mentioned the following about that evening. There was nothing unusual about him, and he was just having a fun time drinking. Kawamura's face turns red quickly when he drinks, so it seems his face was red that night as well, but he didn't appear drunk. A few hours of uneventful celebrating with his former colleagues later, the party came to an end and the group leaves the establishment. Interestingly enough, Kawamura deviates from the most logical way back home. Instead of taking the shortest route from Takadano Baba Station to Kichijoji Station near his home via the Tozai subway line, Kawamura takes the Yamanote line to Shinjuku together with either 1 or 2 colleagues, depending on the source. Between 11 and 11:30 p.m., the colleague or 2 colleagues say goodbye to Kawamura at Shinjuku Station. The last reliable sighting of Kawamura is him walking towards the Chuo Line entrance at around 11:30 p.m. From the moment Kawamura had supposedly boarded this Chuo Line train, it would have taken him approximately 20 minutes from Shinjuku Station to have reached his destination of Kichijoji Station. Somewhere around 11:30 p.m., one eyewitness described a man who resembled Kawamura on a train traveling down the Chuo line between Ogikubo Station and Nishi Ogikubo Station. While the man had apparently wore similar clothing and carried a shoulder bag that resembled the one the eventual victim had been carrying, it's not confirmed that this was actually Kawamura himself. Friday, April 22nd, 10 minutes after midnight. While it's never reliably confirmed that Kawamura reached Musashino City, it's believed he would have reached the train station near his home around 12:10 a.m. From Kichijoji Station, he likely took the following 500-meter route back home, which would take him about 10 minutes on foot. Somewhere between midnight and 1 a.m., possibly around 12:10 a.m., several residents of an apartment building facing Inokashira Street, which Kawamura likely would have used to walk home, heard a loud bang. In later testimony, the residents described the bang to sound as if a traffic accident had happened. Around 12:15 a.m., according to an eyewitness account of a woman who worked in the vicinity of Kichijoji Station, a man resembling Kawamura was seen being beaten by 2 men in their 30s at the location of the main entrance of the Kintetsu department store, Tokyo branch, which has since been replaced by the Yodobashi Camera Multimedia Kichijoji store. She described the victim of the beating to have called out, "That hurts. Stop it. My glasses are falling off." Around 9 a.m., according to a later publicized report by the Tokyo Shimbun, a store manager of a convenience store in Suginami Ward's Kugayama area, about 2 kilometers from Inokashira Park, noticed 2 suspicious men purchasing a large amount of garbage bags. The man had bought a total of 10 packs containing 100 semi-transparent garbage bags in total. The manager reported the following. One was around 30 years old and wearing a t-shirt. The other was around 50 years old and wearing a dark work outfit. The 2 entered the store separately and headed straight for the garbage bag shelves. They looked restless and seemed to be concerned about their surroundings. It felt strange. While one was paying at the register, the other was near the entrance, watching the surroundings. On the evening of the 22nd, Kawamura's wife, Miyoko, filed a missing person report. Between 11:45 p.m. and 1:05 a.m., in a 2017 blog post, a man only known as Mr. Z, who was just a boy at the time, reminisces about an interesting potential relevant experience. Mr. Z watched the Fuji TV broadcast of baseball news around the night before the body was discovered. After watching TV, he and his brother went upstairs to play a video game, keeping the window open for some ventilation. All of a sudden, a distinct smell entered the room, with Mr. Z and his brother asking each other where the smell came from. Mr. Z stated, "The first thing that came to mind was the smell of burning hair. It wasn't just me, my brother had the exact same impression, so it can't be contributed to a simple misunderstanding. When I was a child, my brother and I remember playing with the stove or a lighter by burning our hair, which would result in a really bad smell. We spoke about this smell when the two detectives came to our house. The odor was noticed in the following area, covering both Mr. Z's home as well as the victim's house. Mr. Z's window had been facing the south, and according to historical data of the Japanese Meteorological Agency, the wind came from the southeast. The story gave rise to theories that other body parts might have been burnt that night, and while investigators searched multiple houses in an area of 200 meters around Kawamura's home, Mr. Z explained that he never heard again from investigators after he told his story. Saturday, April 23rd, around 4 a.m., eyewitnesses reported two suspicious men believed to be in their 30s carrying plastic bags into Inokashira Park. Both were estimated to be around 165 centimeters tall, with one wearing a navy blue suit and pants, while the other wore a black jumper. The men were spotted in different locations of the park, and when they noticed someone looking over to them from a park bench, they changed directions and ran off. It's reported that the Inokashira Park cleaning crew probably started collecting garbage at around 9 a.m. The last time garbage was collected had been the day before at around 3 p.m. At this time, no similar bags were reportedly found. This means that the body parts had probably been dumped somewhere in this 18-hour time frame. Around 11 a.m., about 7 hours after the suspicious men were observed, a female cleaner discovered Kawamura's ankle in one of the garbage bags. With the allocation of a significant amount of investigators and resources going after multiple leads, it was expected that new information would surface about the suspect soon. Authorities questioned a large amount of Kawamura's acquaintances and explored a wide range of leads, such as fights and traffic accidents in the area, but couldn't narrow down any suspects in the end. Barely anything considered a lead appeared after talks with acquaintances, friends, neighbors, or co-workers, and Kawamura didn't seem to have any financial problems. In the weeks that followed, Mitaka police handed out over 10,000 flyers around the area, asking the general public to share any information they would have. Unfortunately, Kawamura's father described the investigation at the time as, "Just like a sailing ship hit by a calm stretch, it gets stuck." One acquaintance of Kawamura, who had been questioned in the initial stages of the investigation, testified the following 2 months after Kawamura's body was found. 2 months later, investigators came to my home, but this time, they said they wanted to re-examine Kawamura's personal circumstances. At the time, I was out of Tokyo, but I thought the reason why they came all the way here was because the investigation had hit a dead end. One online comment also mentioned the sad reality of the situation, saying, "If the cleaner hadn't accidentally found this, it would have been incinerated and it would have been a perfect crime." So why did investigators of this bizarre case remain empty-handed? One challenge investigators had to overcome were the confusing and conflicting testimony statements, making it hard to estimate the true value of public information they had acquired. One report even stated that about 3 weeks after Kawamura's body was found, a passerby discovered a right shoulder at the same park. It was first believed that more of Kawamura's body had been dumped, but police later revealed it to be a malicious prank and that the shoulder belonged to a pig or a cow. In addition, while media outlets initially eagerly covered this extremely unusual murder case, the incident soon got overshadowed. On the 26th of April, 1994, only 3 days after Kawamura's body was found, China Airlines Flight 140 crashed at Nagoya Airport, killing 264 of the 271 occupants as the second deadliest plane crash in Japanese history. The tragic incident held the media in its grip, and when news about the crash finally decreased, barely any updates about the dismemberment case emerged. This resulted in a lack of media coverage about the case, which meant that the public's attention had at least partially been diverted from the incident. While a total of 37,000 investigators were involved, another major event caused the investigation to slow down significantly 11 months after the victim's body parts were discovered.
1995年3月20日にオウム真理教により引き起こされた地下鉄サリン事件では14人が死亡、6000人以上が重軽傷を負いました。
On the 20th of March, 1995, 5 members of the infamous Japanese Aum Shinrikyo cult exposed Tokyo subway passengers during their morning commute to the nerve agent sarin. This act of domestic terrorism left 14 dead and over 1,000 injured, while hospitals were flooded with more than 5,000 commuters worrying for their lives. The attack resulted in a redistribution of investigators and police resources, causing the termination of the investigation headquarters for Kawamura's murder case. With the relocation of Metropolitan Police Department's 1st Division investigators, only officers from the local Mitaka police station continued to investigate Kawamura's death. Besides setbacks due to these major incidents, some have also criticized police's overall handling of the case. The victim's acquaintances mentioned they were frustrated with the investigation, and others called police's response slow and sluggish. One official responded to these claims, saying, "An investigation is either 0 or 100. If you can't make an arrest, it can't be helped that you will be called incompetent." Another point of criticism concerns the fact that police seem to spend a significant amount of time and resources investigating Kawamura's wife. While those close to the victim are statistically the most likely to commit murder and dismemberment, Miyoko didn't seem to raise much suspicion. The only action that gave rise to suspicion was the fact that Miyoko filed a missing person report less than 24 hours after her husband had gone missing, which was seen as rather fast by some. Miyoko later responded publicly to these claims, saying, "During the interrogation, I was asked a variety of questions. And since I heard the procedure of investigations is to start with suspecting those close to the victim, to some extent, this made sense. Regarding the search request, for me, my husband who never stayed out overnight didn't come home after going to work on the morning of the 21st. I couldn't get in touch with him at work the next day, so I got worried. So that day, on the evening of the 22nd, I just submitted the report, though some say this was submitted too early." Another point of criticism concerns the report of the 2 suspicious men who had bought 100 bags at a convenience store only hours after Kawamura was last seen. While the store manager had reported the sightings at the time and even kept the receipts and CCTV footage, information had not reached the investigative headquarters until it was reported in the Tokyo Shimbun of October 21st, 6 months after the incident. One former investigator stated the following in an interview. "The fact is, the store manager reported the incident to a patrolling police officer 3 days after the body was discovered, but this information had not reached the investigative headquarters. While immediately after the incident, a large amount of investigators were deployed to conduct interviews, they were unable to obtain information about the convenience store. It raised concerns that there may have been flaws in the initial investigation due to an unfortunate mistake. According to one source, later reports state that the two men were not the culprits and that the garbage bags they bought were different from those that were used in the crime. The case returned to the eye of the media for short periods of time in more recent years.
都立井の頭公園では池の水を抜いて生態系に害を及ぼす外来種の魚の駆除をする貝掘りが行われました。貝掘りは来年で開園してから100年を迎える都立井の頭公園の自然を守り魅力を高めていこうと設けられた地元の自治体や民間企業で作る実行委員会が行いました。
Since the last drainage activity had been conducted in 1987, some visited the park to see whether the remaining 2/3 of the body had been dumped in the pond at the time. While a large amount of bicycles, household appliances, phones, and other trash got removed, no body parts were found. In September of 2017, a temple employee found a human skull near the Jindaiji Temple, about 5 kilometers southwest of Inokashira Park.
先月28日の午前11時ごろ、東京調布市の深大寺の敷地内で草むしりをしていた寺の関係者から骨のようなものがあるなどと110番通報がありました。警察官が確認したところ、頭頂部と下顎のない頭蓋骨が草むらの土の上に置かれていました。司法解剖の結果、頭頂部は鋭利な道具で切られた跡がありました。死後2年から50年ほど経っていて、性別は不明ですが、年齢は30歳前後以上だということです。
According to media reports, CCTV footage captured a woman in dark clothes carrying an umbrella entering the area. She stood near the location where the skull was found for a few minutes, making a gesture as if she was brushing something away with her hand. When someone called out to her, she quickly left and she hasn't been identified since. While experts stated that the cuts at the top of the skull are similar to those made by doctors who examine the brain during autopsies, University of Tokyo professor Makino Yosuke stated that anyone who is knowledgeable about how to use blades could do it. Some linked the skull to the Inokashira Park dismemberment case, as the head had never been found. One blog post made by a woman who lived near Jindaiji Temple at the time remembers a strange visit she received from investigators about half a year after Kawamura's death. The officers didn't explicitly say it concerned the Inokashira case, but the poster suspected this to be the case at the time. She wrote, "So they were asking me something like, 'How long has that car been parked in front of this apartment?' I have no interest in cars, so I didn't even notice when it was parked there, so I just answered, I don't know. However, I've been wondering about that question ever since." Interestingly enough, the human skull was found very close to her home 23 years later, prompting her to remember this notable encounter and writing it down on her blog. In the end, many questions remain unanswered. Why Kawamura? Did the act involve multiple perpetrators? And where is the remainder of the victim's body? Due to the absence of a definite suspect in the police's investigation and the overall strange nature of the dismemberment, theories started to arise about what happened to Kawamura and why. Even though most dismemberment cases are caused by a sole perpetrator, some speculate multiple culprits to have taken a part in this dismemberment. Especially the meticulous way in which the body was prepared and dumped in a relatively short period of time seems to suggest that the group may have been responsible. One online comment said, "It might be true that they could have frozen the body. Either way, it wouldn't be possible for one person to do it. It's well known that multiple people were involved in this case." In contrast, others believe a sole perpetrator could have performed the dismemberment, as is the case in most Japanese dismemberment incidents, with Kawamura gone missing for about 34 hours, and multiple other Japanese cases showing dismemberment durations of about 2 to 4 hours. The option of a single culprit still is a possibility. Let's take a look at some of the most talked about theories as to how Kawamura may have lost his life after his final goodbye. Theory number 1. Grudge. Especially in the early stages of the investigation, police mainly focused their efforts on the culprit being a relative or close acquaintance of the victim, in particular, Kawamura's wife, Miyoko. This makes sense, since in the more than 120 dismemberment cases that happened in post-war Japan, over 80% showed involvement of someone the victim knew. Discreetly disposing the body, eliminating fingerprints, and even removing all of the blood likely indicated that the identity of the victim may have given investigators clues to find the culprit. Even though police questioned a vast amount of people, even going back to Kawamura's childhood acquaintances, no one could be marked as a suspect. Police spent so much effort digging through Kawamura's acquaintances that critics believe too much time and resources were used exploring this theory. Other than acquaintances, Kawamura could have gotten into a fight on his way home with complete strangers. While co-workers reported the victim to not be drunk, they did describe his face as a little red, which could have played a part into some unfortunate run-in with the wrong people. As was described earlier, one eyewitness reported, around midnight on Friday, April 22nd, at the north side of Kichijoji Station, near the then Kintetsu department store, a man resembling Kawamura was beaten by 2 other men. However, according to one source, investigators later discredited this testimony due to the vagueness of the statement and the fact that the department store was actually on the other side of the train station compared to where Kawamura would have made his way home. In addition, according to the autopsy report, there hadn't been any wounds consistent with Kawamura being beaten up. Theory number 2. Mistaken identity. The mistaken identity theory was first proposed in the early stages of the investigation, with reports stating, the reason why the crime is so inconsistent is because Kawamura was not the original target. However, the theory was given new life when journalist Shinjiro Inomata of the Daily News Online reported about a new testimony acquired in 2015, 21 years after Kawamura's death. The testimony came from a street vendor only referred to as Mr. A, who didn't personally know the victim, but rented a warehouse close to Kawamura's home at the time. It was said that Mr. A was mistaken for Kawamura on several occasions by the victim's own acquaintances, with one of them saying, "I can't believe there's someone who looks so much like him." Mr. A mentions that in 1994, young foreigners from nearby countries would visit Japan and work as street vendors to fund their travel plans. Mr. A painted a picture of what the atmosphere was in 1994, saying, "At the time, I was somewhat of a leader amongst the street vendors of this area, so when foreigners suddenly showed up in the midst of it, they were seen as business rivals. In short, it was as if something like a turf war broke out. They ignored the rules and started doing business wherever they could. Even though we are street vendors, there are rules." Mr. A tried to fight back with the help from others, but started to notice that the foreigners were not just travelers. According to Mr. A, some of these foreigners were actually Secret Service agents disguised as travelers who had entered Japan under false identities. Mr. A didn't specify the country of these supposed agents, though earlier reports wrote about a country in East Asia, while online comments proposed their country of origin to be either Israel, China, Taiwan, South Korea, or North Korea. Mr. A believed he accidentally interfered with a covert operation, resulting in him being followed. With his increasing fear for his life, the businessman moved from hotel to hotel, even claiming he was under constant surveillance when visiting different parts of the country. "I thought I was done for," is what he said. Mr. A remembered he was hiding in a business hotel in Tokyo when Kawamura's body was found, saying, "I saw it on a variety show or something. They showed the area close to where I used the house as office space on screen. When I saw footage of the victim, it sent chills down my spine. At that point, I was convinced this person was mistaken for me and killed." One source mentioned that years later, one of Mr. A's family members had been murdered and dismembered as well. The suspect had supposedly fled overseas and is yet to be arrested. No further public information seems to be available about this seemingly strange coincidence. That said, whether or not Mr. A's testimony is reliable is up for debate. Even if his words hold ground, the testimony was only given 6 years after the statute of limitations had already expired. In addition, as far as statistics go, one post noted that less than 1% of post-war Japan's dismemberment cases are said to be cases of mistaken identity, causing further doubt upon this theory. Theory number 3. Traffic accident cover-up. Some propose Kawamura to be involved in a traffic accident on his way home, and that the culprit tried to cover his tracks by disposing the body. As mentioned before, witnesses living in a building facing Inokashira Street described a loud bang to come from the direction of Inokashira Park. Kawamura likely would have used this street to get home, and the timing seems to fit as well. While weather didn't seem to have obstructed the driver's view that day, several of the exits of Inokashira Street have no traffic lights, giving rise to opportunities for traffic accidents. When officers investigated the street, glass fragments probably related to a windshield were found on the opposite side of the street. While compelling, police eventually stated that the sound and the glass fragments were probably unrelated to the crime. Some suggest the building of the eyewitnesses to have stood at the southern side of the street, and while glass was found on the opposite side of the road, the noise was heard from the direction of Inokashira Park. Furthermore, no information has been made public about potential accident traces. In addition, the meticulous and relative fast way of disposing the body might indicate that the murder was planned beforehand rather than being an accident, according to some. With Professor Sato saying, "Would a simple hit-and-run criminal dismember a body in such a way?" Theory number 4. Double life. Some propose that while Seiichi Kawamura seemed innocent, he might actually have led a double life. One book stated the following: "At the time, Mr. Kawamura had been promoted to chief, so colleagues from his former company near Takada no Baba held a celebration for him. Mr. Kawamura attended the event, drank peacefully from start to finish, sang about 2 karaoke songs at the after party, then the party came to a close. He then took the Yamanote line, even though he used to commute to his former workplace on the Tozai line. Why didn't he take this line? If he was just returning home, it would have been okay to take the train he was used to, so this was puzzling. This leads to speculations that Mr. Kawamura took the Yamanote line because he had some kind of business in the Shinjuku area by himself." According to a co-worker, during the party, the subject of a female colleague from Shanghai who used to work at the company had come up. The woman had supposedly started working as a club hostess in Shinjuku's Kabukicho district. Kawamura reportedly joined the conversation by saying, "Oh, really?" Rumors point towards Kawamura to have taken a detour to Shinjuku, and that he may have gotten killed while meeting this woman. In one of his books, journalist Kyoji Asakura mentions he uncovered the bar that the supposed Shanghai colleague had become a hostess at. The journalist visited the bar, but it had closed down a few days before the visit, and he hadn't been able to interview the woman since. A completely different angle some consider is that Kawamura may have been involved in illegal building activities. In 2005, a scandal came to light in which multiple buildings had been built at low cost with the falsification of earthquake-resistant standards set by the government. This resulted in online theories like this one. There seems to be a story that first-class architect Kawamura was killed after being caught up in a scandal related to falsifying earthquake resistance at the time. It was also said that the method of cutting the pieces with a saw in a precise length and thickness implied that someone from the construction industry was involved. One writer wrote the following theory in his book in concordance with these events. When the victim took on a job outside of his architectural firm as a side job, he may have been involved in a major scandal of the falsification of earthquake proofing of apartment buildings. At the time, some of the construction companies he is believed to be involved with used gang-affiliated developers and real estate brokers who were brazenly building illegal structures and falsified earthquake-resistant standards. While this could be a link between Kawamura and the Japanese underworld, as far as public information goes, he has never been linked to any of these fraud cases. Theory number 5. Cult involvement. In the 90s, several religious cults were active in the Tokyo area, with the Aum Shinrikyo cult being one of the most prolific. Rumors arose of Kawamura being involved in one of these religious groups, as some cults concentrated their activities near the Nishi Ogikubo area. Forensic pathologist Professor Sato was one of the first to bring up this theory to police officers when explaining his autopsy findings, mentioning, "I explained the following regarding the disposal of the body. I believe this was the act of multiple mind-controlled people quietly undertaking this action, such as those in an extremist cult. As far as I know, there hasn't been a case in the history of this world in which a body had been disposed of in such a detailed and unusual manner. The only ones who could do such a thing would be a group with some kind of religious background." When the professor proposed involvement of a cult such as Aum Shinrikyo and suggested the police to set up an investigation into nearby religious groups, he was not taken very serious, with Professor Sato stating, "However, the response I got was, 'No, Professor, they wouldn't go that far.'" Despite the reluctance of police to investigate this theory in more detail, according to the professor, investigators of the National Police Agency quickly returned to hear the story about the Inokashira dismemberment again after Aum Shinrikyo's sarin subway attack 11 months later. While rumors of the victim and his wife having connections to a religious cult started to spread, any involvement was later denied in an interview by Miyoko herself. However, another statement the victim's wife made seemed to catch the attention of some, with her mentioning, "The only thing police asked me was whether my husband made any detours. It seemed that when someone from work gave him a ride home, he had gotten out of the car 2 or 3 times along the way. I had no idea about this. The location seemed to be in the Takkaido area, but it didn't happen often, and even police didn't know where he went from that point onward." As the Takkaido area is rumored to be the location of the facility belonging to the religious group that Kawamura was rumored to have attended, the religious cult theory does seem to hold some ground. Some seem to link the Aum Shinrikyo cult to Kawamura's murder, and while Aum Shinrikyo had killed and concealed several people, in 5 out of 6 cases, the bodies had been burned and disposed rather than cut. In addition, there were no traces of poison or drugs, in contrast to Aum Shinrikyo's manner of operation. Either way, a definite link to a specific cult has never been found. There are a multitude of other theories speculating about the reason for Kawamura's death, all citing certain details connected to this case. As an example, one theory considers organ trafficking, with rumors saying that this is the reason why Kawamura's organs were never found. Others mention trouble with illegal fishermen in Inokashira Park that tried to silence Kawamura after he may have witnessed them at the pond, pointing towards the way the body was packaged and drained of blood, as can be seen in the fishing industry. Broader theories ranged from involvement of a restaurant or hospital to a stalker of Kawamura's wife who wanted him out of the picture. Some say the culprit is in some way connected to the police as reason why the investigation hasn't seen any significant results. In the end, None of these are backed up by reliable evidence, leaving the case unsolved. Victim's father, Seiichi Kawamura, self-published a book named Trajectory of the Heart 10 months after the incident, with him trying to keep his son's death from being forgotten by the public. The book reflects on Seiichi Kawamura's childhood and continues all the way up until the family's feelings at the time the body was found. Seiichi ends his book by imagining him having a conversation with his son in front of the altar at his funeral, with the father eventually bursting into tears. In the afterword, Seiichi mentions, "I had intended to publish the book once the solution was in sight, but since the investigation appeared to be dragging on, I had no choice but to publish the book in its unfinished form." Unfortunately, Seiichi Kawamura passed away in 1997 without seeing justice for his son's death. Kawamura's second son was born 5 months after his death, leaving the widowed Miyoko to take care of their 2 children by herself. The family moved away from their home after the incident, with Miyoko saying, "I don't want to remember the incident anymore." Shortly after, in the spring of 1995, the home was rented by producer Toshio Okada, who initially had no idea about the background of the former residents. While the incident didn't take place in the home, Okada has mentioned that strange phenomena happened.
ちょっとだけ変なんですよ。例えば家鳴りが激しいんですよね。家がしょっちゅうギシギシ言うんですよ。2つ目がですね、天井裏とか屋根裏からですね、やたら音がするんですよ。リビングのね、ちょうど真ん中辺の壁と天井に裂け目が入ってるんですよね。
Due to the bizarre and gruesome nature of the incident, even decades later, references are still made about the case in popular media. One example is the anime Occultic 9, presenting the discovery of 256 bodies in Inokashira Park's pond. Coincidentally, about 1.5 years before the incident took place in 1992, the video game Shin Megami Tensei was released. The opening scene of the game depicts a murder at Inokashira Park, after which a mysterious group starts conducting strange rituals. While many believe this to be a mere coincidence, some rumors claim the game functioned as a prophecy for Kawamura's death. In the years following the incident, about 250 pieces of information were sent in to police, and other small details appeared in interviews and books. With multiple authors trying their shot at uncovering the truth behind the incident, a definite breakthrough never happened. And with that, the possible untold eyewitness testimonies and pieces of information that might have the key to solve this case slowly fade with time. Well, in February of 2010, Japan eventually abolished the statute of limitations for certain crimes. The statute of limitations of the investigation into Kawamura's death had already expired at midnight of the 23rd of April, 2009. The termination of this fruitless investigation removed the last glimmer of hope that justice may one day be served, leaving the case unsolved. The chief of the 1st Investigative Division at the time responded, "We conducted an exhaustive investigation, but we were unfortunately unable to arrest the culprit. We are extremely sorry for the victim and his family." With both of Kawamura's sons now in their 30s, nearing the age at which their father met his unfortunate demise, they can only continue to move forward in their lives. While in contrast, widow Miyoko's heart still lies in the past, with her stating, "Time has been standing still." To this day, the name Kawamura is still carved into stone in front of the family home, functioning as a sad reminder of the kind family man who never got to return home.